Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, first part there for the 25th of April 2024. Thank you so much to those who hung out with Jake Bro and myself in the live chat we had last night. I advise you go and watch that. It's a great chat. We got into some fairly decent depth on a number of different subjects. Lots of people seem to be giving some great feedback on the thread as to their enjoyment there. So if you haven't checked it out, I'd really appreciate it if you did. He was a great interlocutor, great bloke to talk to. Anyway, let's get to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course, and you can find those caveats in the description to my video below. We see the personnel losses ticking up to over 1,000 for the first time in a number of weeks there. So that possibly signifies a ramping up of activity or some large troop accumulations taken out, but it's probably the former rather than the latter. 1,040 lost there, 13 tanks, 14 APVs and 28 artillery systems. So the tanks and APVs, tanks certainly ticking up a little bit, I think would suggest some Russian attacks in a number of places. Obviously, the usual suspects. We have Chasiv Yar, just to the west of Bakhmut. We have the Avdiivka salient, Ocheretny particularly. Then we have Krasnohorivka, Novomikhailivka. Those three areas are where it all seems to be happening at the moment. One multiple launch rocket system, one anti-aircraft warfare system. 57 vehicles and fuel tanks is a very high number, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So some pretty challenging numbers for the Russians across the categories there. The 28 artillery systems is not as high as we have seen, but it's a fairly decent number. It's above average. I think the Ukrainians are having a bit of a go at the Russian artillery. I also think they're having a bit of a go at the Russian anti-aircraft warfare systems. I don't know whether they are explicitly trying to lay the groundwork for their F-16s to hit the skies. It would be absolutely vital for the Ukrainians to take out the anti-aircraft warfare system of the Russians. So, if they're not doing it, they should be doing it explicitly. And I think, though, we are seeing that a bit more. And we'll come on to some video evidence of that in a second. Here we have Andrew Perpetua's loss statistics. He's surveyed the socials and he has found that the Russians have lost quite a lot more equipment than the Ukrainians. This is a really good day for the Ukrainians. A ratio of about, I'm guessing here, as I always do, probably 7-1, maybe 8-1, 7-1. That there's a lot of Russian losses against the Ukrainians. Let's look at the Ukrainians first. I always like to go to them first, see what the value of what they've lost is. So we've got some damaged pieces of artillery, including an M777. We have a destroyed tank, unknown cause and date. It's sometimes these vehicles are so fundamentally disassembled that you can't tell exactly what they were. We have a captured M113 and a destroyed Mastiff. That's a UK-provided MRAP mine-resistant ambush protection vehicle, and an abandoned Kirpi. That means Hedgehog. That's the Turkish mine-resistant ambush protection vehicle. Anyway, a couple of those destroyed, abandoned, but nothing too crazy for the Ukrainians. And then it's mainly going to be about mass of equipment for the Russians. That is just far outstripping the Ukrainian losses, and that would indicate that the Russians are losing unsustainable amounts of kit. But actually, there's a few high-value bits of kit here as well. So we have a Book M3 and a Book M2. So you have the M1, M2, M3 as they go up in, I guess, advancement. They were taken out by Gimlers, but they've been old. Those are old losses, but unmapped. I do have some new imagery of a book, so I don't know if that's going to be subsequently added. We have an electronic warfare system and a whole bunch of surveillance and comms stuff, including comms towers. Engineering vehicle, some artillery pieces, just pretty old D20s and 30s in the main. One self-propelled gun. We have a bunch of tanks, T-72s, T-80s, different variants, and a pretty vast list of infantry fighting vehicles, all the usual culprits there. And a couple of APCs, MRAP, Typhoon. We haven't seen them for a long time. Kamaz Typhoon. Some trucks, civilian vehicles, and a four-wheeler, an ATV. So just a huge amount of equipment for the Russians to lose. And as I said, it's just a pretty unsustainable way to go about doing war. If we go and look at some of the sources here, we're going to start with that HIMARS strike on the radar. That I think this is one where I was like, oh, I'm not 100% sure it wasn't a decoy. Well, actually, it seems it was. It wasn't a decoy, actually, and it has been damaged, not fundamentally, but I don't think they're going to be using that in a hurry. As I said, the HIMARS struck. This was purportedly for an S-400 air defense system. The HIMARS missiles struck nearby, and there were two support trucks and the radar, and you couldn't really see the damage, but you assumed with the tungsten ball bearings or shrapnel or whatever spreading out as they do from those gimlet strikes, that damage would have been done. So anyway, Special Kherson Cat says slightly damaged due to inaccurate HIMARS fire. HIMARS strike. The Russian 92H2E, previously mistaken for a 96L6 all-altitude detection radar for the S-400 air defense system. As a source says, the damage is a result of a HIMARS strike. Two missiles were used. It's worth noting that the strike occurred immediately after the arrival of the air defense system at the position. In other words, the Ukrainian Armed Forces reconnaissance drone was waiting for the complex to arrive at previously known positions. I think this is interesting. So what you get with air defense systems is there's probably some favored places to park up to put those systems. And if you are using reconnaissance drones over a long period of time, you get to know some of those places where the other side prefers to keep their kit. And this is because certain points will have better elevation, tree cover not too getting in the way of your radars, and accessible from the road, or any kind of variable going on there. But there will be certain places, I think, just the practicalities of human nature, there'll be certain places that they will come back to on occasion. And if you are just waiting over those places, I mean, it's worth putting up a drone, I guess, to just wait over a particular place. Just send that drone up time after time. It might not achieve anything for a long time, and then eventually you get an S-400 system setting up shop, or radar for an S-400, and you're like, okay, it's worth flying over this point for a month, because now we got that bad boy. Get the Gimlers in, let's hit it. But the Gimlers, unfortunately, didn't. The guided multiple launch rocket system missiles didn't hit accurately enough. So the HIMARS operator made an inaccurate strike, which resulted in minor damage to the radar. Also, it's worth noting that the death of the signalman of the Radio Technical Troops Unit, Senior Sergeant Andrei Nikolaevich Bushiev, position Koshma, due to shrapnel wounds. Interesting point is that along with the S-300 air defense system, judging by the radar system, it was an S-400. The Pantsir S-1 air defense system was also in position, which was responsible for covering the air defense system. However, the Pantsir failed to detect the approach of the missiles. We see this quite a lot, which is the air defense systems or radars or whatever components end up getting blown up by the very missiles that they're supposed to detect, or anti-drone systems getting blown up by the drones they're supposed to detect. I mean, this seems to happen pretty regularly. But you can see there that the damage is not, too bad. Yep, okay, replace the windows. But even, I don't know that... It depends whether these pieces have gone through the outside and gone through any of the engine parts. But it doesn't look like there's massive amounts of damage. So I think that was significantly far enough away that I don't think the shrapnel penetrated too much. Of course, it'll be interesting to see what the damage would have been to the radar itself. Nonetheless, yeah, minor damage, could easily be usable in the near distant future. Now, Russian Book 1 air defense system taken out here. I will not play the whole thing because you end up getting into trouble. But it cooks off, and that's the end of that one. That was taken out by a HIMARS. And again, as I said a couple of times over the last few days, and other sources have said as well, HIMARS are being used a lot more now. I think with the aid package coming in, and possibly actually aid package from last month, the last presidential drawdown package from the US, there is this idea that they got or claim that they got 100 ATACMs in the last one, and they've secretly been using ATACMs. There's potentially 3 occasions they've used ATACMs, and the longer range ATACMs as well, over the last month or so. Well, actually, they could well have received a lot of HIMARS rockets too, HIMARS missiles too, and as a result, we are seeing a lot more vehicles and equipment being taken out by HIMARS. Given that we had not seen so many the sort of, I guess, 5 months previously. Hunt for the Russian air defense continues before the arrival of F-16 fighter jets. So this is exactly what I was saying. This is Russia destroying supposedly an S-300 radar, and yeah, we'll have a look at this just quickly. There you go. So that is potentially an S-300 radar blowing up. Now, this is the Tavaz group. I've not seen this listed anywhere else, so I hope it's not an old one. Tavaz seemed to be doing a good job, as I reported yesterday, of taking out a bunch of high value equipment with HIMARS generally. So yeah, it's not. It wouldn't be unusual, or as I said earlier, I'm predicting the Ukrainians to be really going at the Russian air defense systems and radars ahead of those F-16s hitting, because they're going to have some serious challenges. The Ukrainians, as I mentioned a number of times before, F-16s can only land in certain air bases, and not as versatile as, say, the Gripen. And there will only be certain places that they can be kept around Ukraine, and Russia will know that. They're gonna have a pretty good idea where the F-16s are going to be kept, and they will be just waiting to absolutely hammer them at the air bases. But when they take off the F-16s, they're also going to be obviously wanting to hammer them with their S-300s, S-400s, and their greater ranged air defense systems. So Ukraine have to work on both taking out air defenses and radars, as well as somehow securing their planes when they are parked up, which is why I keep suggesting that they should park them up in, say, Poland and or another country nearby, Romania, park them up there. Then when they want to send them out on a mission, they send them to a Ukrainian air base to refuel. Then they take off, fire all their stuff, and then return to the Romanian air base. So these are Ukrainian airframes being used essentially from Romania, but you can try and say they're sent from a Ukrainian airbase by getting to land in the Ukrainian airbase before taking off. But the idea is they're not kept at Ukrainian air bases, and as a result, the Russians can't hit them at the air bases, which I think is where they're going to be super vulnerable. We have seen MiG-29s recently being taken out at Dnipro and Mykolaiv and other places, and it's really frustrating to see the Ukrainians lose their very valuable airframes while they're parked up. Okay. Intel Skitsko here says, Russians are conducting strikes against Ukrainian construction equipment that is being utilised to construct new defensive fortifications. This is a good strategy that the Russians are doing. I called for the Ukrainians to do the exact same thing on the Russians in the winter of 2022 and spring of 2023. It was not done, and as a consequence, the Russians were able to build a solid defensive position across the entire front. I called on the Ukrainians to do a similar campaign on rail construction equipment since last autumn to delay or make the Malovodne to Burna Railroad non-permissive, and have been again calling for track laying equipment to be targeted, and still Ukraine does not strike these very valuable targets. Logistics win wars. Okay, so this is the Russians hitting Ukrainian construction vehicles, making the fortifications behind the lines. This is obviously very important equipment, and you can see a number of these have been hit by the Russians. Talking about that railway line, if it's the one that's going through Mariupol, Berdyansk, and into sort of Zaporizhia and towards Kherson, all the way from Taganrog, the top of the Sea of Azov, then I wonder whether the Ukrainians are waiting for everything to get built and then hitting it after it's been built, or I don't know. I presume there'll be bridges somewhere. Like I said last night in a live, you don't want to blow up railways. You want to blow up bridges. Railways are easy to fix. Bridges are less easy to fix. And but I don't know if it's worth sending your long distance missiles to take out things like excavators and building equipment on a railway line. Yeah, you would do that if you have unlimited numbers of HIMARS, but otherwise you're going to be going for things like air defense systems. Here we have another Russian turtle tank on the Krasnohorivka front. Recently, the Russians have been using more tanks with modifications like this one. Absolutely. I've now seen a number of these being used. And one has to say that if they are continuing to use them, build them and use them, then they must have some utility. This isn't just some kind of silly folly. These actually have a practical use. I would assume that the turrets are probably not in perfect working order. Because they really are restricting the turrets, or they just don't particularly need the turrets to be able to fire at a 90-degree angle or whatnot. But anyway, they are being used, and in fact, there's this video that you can see here that shows just bit of music to keep you perked up this morning. So this is I forget where it is, but anyway, in Donetsk, I think this is somewhere in Donetsk. So probably near Krasnohorivka. You're seeing these. I mean, that's huge. Look at the size of that. But that looks similar to the one that we just seen stuck. Actually, it's got that stuff training off it. But anyway, the Russians are using those in an increased number. Right, we're going to go to distant strikes now, and here we are going to start with Moscow. Actually, which is to say that yesterday there was a big fire in Moscow. I have no idea how it started or what it is, but that looks pretty significant to me, to be perfectly honest. So that could well be Russia on fire, or it could be a strike. I mean, there are... Oh, stop it, would you? There are a number of times that Ukraine hits Russia and we don't really know. Either we don't hear anything about it, or we suddenly see something on fire and you're left wondering what's happened. Is it sabotage? Is it a drone? Is it a missile? Etc. Or careless smoker. But anyway, Moscow. Something in Moscow was on fire yesterday. We then had today the footage coming out from Omsk of petroleum tanks on fire, and this looks a pretty sizable fire going on there. So very deep black smoke of telltale sign of oil, and there we have, big fire. So that's happening in Omsk. And indeed, more footage coming out about that. Or in Omsk, oil tanks are burning. Again, don't know if that's as a result of a drone strike, missile strike, etc. Who knows? And then in occupied Simferopol, 3 railroad tank cars with fuel burst into flames, spontaneous combustion. The cause... sorry, I just have to take the phone. Someone phoning me to tell me they're at the door. That's the joy of wearing noise-cancelling headphones. You can't hear a damn thing. Anyway, so I was just saying that, here the cause of the fire, according to the propagandist version, was allegedly a violation of the technological process. A violation of the technological process. What kind of excuse is that? The casualties are reported. The English is a bit screwed up there, so maybe there are no casualties or there are casualties. I'm not too sure. But anyway, this could well be sabotage in Simferopol, Crimea. Crimea does have Atesh, I think predominantly Tatar group of partisans who get up to no good there for the Russians. So across Russia and occupied Crimea here, there are a number of big fires happening, and I just have a sneaky suspicion that you're going to see a lot more of this going on with the aid packages coming through. I think it's going to give the Ukrainians permission to use more missiles within occupied territories and then really concentrate on using drones into Russia. So I was just thinking there in my head that it was a real shame, because a lot of people have been talking about how the US could give Ukraine permission to use the 300-kilometer ATACMS missiles into Russia, but I think Jake Sullivan has put a kibosh on that in some statements from yesterday, but we'll talk about that in the next video. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces here. Artur Rehi says about the Deputy Defense Minister, so Shoigu's underling here, talks about him in this thread. There is now a lot of discussion about the arrest of Deputy Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, Timur Ivanov, on charges of bribery. So I reported this yesterday and the day before. This is the second person in the ministry after Shoigu. No matter how funny it may sound for Russia, yes, precisely for bribes. But the detention of Timur Ivanov is a strong blow to Shoigu. Apparently, Shoigu himself did not know about the upcoming arrest because the day before he held a meeting where Ivanov also took part. It was Shoigu who brought Ivanov to the ministry and covered for him more than once in previous cases. Ivanov's arrest is in no way a fight against corruption. In Russia, everyone steals as much as they can. In the Russian system, every official has a separate folder in the FSB, and when a signal comes from above that a person needs to be processed, they take it off the shelf and put it into action. A person working for the Russian government, even if he has palaces, yachts, and expensive cars, actually does not possess any of this. It does not belong to him and can be taken away at any moment, and he is sent to prison. The reasons why he was removed from this post are not yet clear, but most likely it will be known later. Artur Ivanov was not a military man. His name Artur? I didn't think it was. Timur Ivanov. He's getting himself a bit confused there, his old Rehi. Timur Ivanov was not a military man, although he wore a uniform. He was involved in the construction of military and other facilities. For example, he was responsible for the construction of the Vostochny Cosmodrome, where record amounts were stolen. He was responsible for the construction of the Patriot Park and construction in Mariupol, destroyed by the Russians. He held the civil position of acting state councillor of the Russian Federation First Class. In the army, this would correspond to a general's post. That's why there were all these uniforms with medals. His arrest actually indicates that a serious intra-clan struggle has begun in Putin's system. Ivanov's place is very profitable because during construction there are some of the largest kickbacks. Now the struggle for this place will begin, and all the contenders will now rush to compromise and snitch on each other in a fight for this place. Putin created a system like any dictator where he pits everyone against each other and forces one to fight with another. His task is to ensure that no one can unite so much as to become a threat to his own power. Whether clouds are gathering over Shoigu himself is also difficult to say now. After Prigozhin's rebellion, Putin does not risk introducing new players relying on old, proven and loyal people, albeit absolutely useless ones. Now, just a second on that. Shoigu, there are these rumors that this could indicate that Shoigu might be falling out of favor. Shoigu, one can argue, is just pretty useless, as Rehi says here. But actually, that's exactly the kind of guy that Putin needs around him. He needs people that, A, aren't particularly good, because then they outshine Putin and they become a threat. So he needs people that aren't particularly good, but also people who are incredibly loyal, which Shoigu appears to be. And so that is the perfect kind of candidate for Putin to surround himself with. You get a lot of people like that, and the really, forthright, possibly successful people like Prigozhin end up falling by the wayside. And we had Surovikin, who seems to have disappeared off the scene. So, yeah. In this system, such people are actually allowed almost everything: steal, send soldiers in batches to their deaths. But the main things to remain loyal. Failures at the front may force Putin to make some personnel decisions. So it's now difficult to vouch for Shoigu's safety. But no matter what happens here. It's all for the benefit of Ukraine, because the Russian system is devouring itself in this way. It begins to collapse from the inside and weakens, and with it naturally, Putin's power will weaken too. That footage was absolutely brilliant. That still is taken from a great point where Shoigu just shows how little he knows and like, yeah, I'll re-show that video at some point. The list of Russia's problems is only growing every day. Kadyrov is also preparing to kick the bucket, and if the struggle for power begins in Chechnya, it will explode significantly. So that's Artur Rehi's opinion of what's going on there. But I think there is no doubt that the news of Ivanov being arrested is a serious thing for Russia. I mean, you've got the army's number 2 being arrested. You've got the chief of staff, General Gerasimov, who's supposed to be in charge of the entire war, has gone AWOL. I thought he was injured in that strike in Crimea, and I still think that. And he's come back for a little, possibly a scene of putting a medal on someone or on a few people, but certainly voting. But he followed Shoigu around and didn't appear to be able to walk particularly well, and looked completely gormless. And so I think Gerasimov is basically not functioning. What is going on behind the scenes with the Russian Ministry of Defense and in the prosecution of the war? Is it just being left to people within the occupied territories, the kind of hierarchy of the military that are actually doing the war? Is there any central oversight going on? I don't know. You know, this kind of thing with Ivanov being arrested could be reflective of a general malaise in the Russian military hierarchy. Ex-wife of detained Russian Deputy of Defense Minister Ivanov has disappeared. So relatives of Svetlana Zakharova, the ex-wife of Deputy Defense Minister Timur Ivanov, detained for bribes, are unable to contact her, according to Baza. According to unconfirmed reports, the 50-year-old woman, also known under the surnames Maniovich and Ivanova, may have been detained together with her ex-husband. In December 2022, Alexei Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation released an investigation into the luxurious life, and I reported this, and in fact I've shown you this picture before, luxurious life of Ivanov and Zakharova. According to the material, the couple spent more than €1 million on vacations, with Svetlana's personal accounts paid by a firm that was supposed to be engaged in the reconstruction of occupied and destroyed Mariupol. So money that should be going to the rebuilding of Mariupol went to these guys having nice holidays. Officially, Ivanov and Zakharova divorced after the deputy minister fell under sanctions, fearing that Svetlana would be included in the sanctions list. Anyway, so she has gone missing. Russians are purging libraries in occupied Crimea of books referencing the Holodomor and Crimean Tatars. According to Pravda here, this is absolutely unsurprising. Any pro-Russian in my threads or anti-Ukrainian who talks about like lack of freedom in Ukraine and is throwing stones in glass houses here, because the Russians, you know, again, like I often do, this is what freedom looks like in Russia. Or in this case, occupied Ukraine under Russian occupation, purging libraries that reference history and culture and ethnicity outside of what Russia want their people to believe is just, this is pure fascistic autocracy in my book. Right, the Russian Orthodox priest Dmitry Safronov has been suspended for 3 years. At the time, I was wondering about this. So, Alexei Navalny died in prison, and then there was all this argument over how he was going to get buried, what was going to happen for the funeral. There was rumour that it wouldn't be allowed at all. But there needed to be some kind of outlet for those people, I guess. So sometimes you have to let off steam. If you're in this sort of dictatorial environment, you realise that some people are going to get angry, so you need to allow them a regulated let off of that pressure. So they allowed the funeral to take place, but I was wondering about the priest. The Russian Orthodox priest Dmitry Safronov was suspended for 3 years following his overseeing the funeral of late opposition leader Alexei Navalny, according to the document posted on the website of the Moscow City Diocese on April the 23rd. The document did not give an official reason for his suspension, but it is believed to be connected with Navalny's funeral. And there you go. Anyway, because that's what freedom looks like in Russia. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.